So Rob asked me to give a talk on EmberConf, so here goes. So this is my first EmberConf. It was incredibly valuable. I thought it was really, really good. I'm definitely going to go back next year. There was a lot that happened and a lot that I wanted to share, but I thought the best way to keep this brief was to talk about the keynote and some general takeaways, and then give you guys some links in case anybody wants to go check out videos or whatever like that. So yeah. My name, like he said, is Michael Swanson. I work for a company called Skills Engine. We do data as a service, and then we use Ember and Rails to create web applications that allow individuals, educators, and industry professionals to communicate around a common skills language. So let's go ahead and get started with the keynote by Tom and Yehuda. The main section of the keynote was entitled "The Web Ahead." Tom and Yehuda talked about the future of the web from their perspective and Ember's role in it. The TLDR is that the way we build web apps is fundamentally changing, and that the future of Ember is to be an SDK for the web. My favorite quote from the keynote was this one. It says, "The answer to how we solve the problems with the web is not that we're going to wait for some browser vendor to come down from on high with a stone tablet and gift us the perfect API that will solve our problems. The genius of the web has always been that the web development community could cobble together amazing experiences with chewing gum and baling wire, and then take these amazing experiences and make them accessible to millions of developers without having to understand how the underlying things work." Yehuda said this, and there was a reference at the conference to MacGyver, so he's the MacGyver of code. So they talked a lot about the future web, and from their perspective, the future web was about mobile web. And so they talked a lot about the trade-offs between mobile web and native web apps, and how those trade-offs are viewed both by developers and their managers, and how when people are making decisions about which way to go with their mobile apps, how they kind of make the choice between these two things. And so it all seemed to really boil down to a couple of really hard problems, or a few really hard problems that web apps face on mobile devices and mobile networks: device integration, offline availability, initial and subsequent load times, and rendering performance. And they talked through they talked through a lot of different stuff, but basically a native-like experience and fast load times is the goal. And Ember is attacking that problem on multiple fronts. So they talked about various things that they see on the future for Ember. The first one, obviously, is fast boot. 1.0 lands in Ember 2.7. They talked about that there's a beta available right now. If you go to emberfastboot.com, you can actually download and install the add-on, and then and start playing with it right now. And so the other thing they talked about was Ember engines. Dan Gebhardt and his several other people are working on that. This idea that you could progressively load a mobile application by just loading what the user wants right now, and then going and getting the next piece of functionality later. They also talked about svelte builds with ES6 modules. And basically the idea of being able to reduce the size of our apps by only loading the parts of the code that we need. And then there were several talks on service workers and application cache. And the idea was that these enable offline and push notifications. And like ES6, Ember is again betting on the future and relying on what's available now. They talked about that they want service workers, they want us to use service workers, but right now, App Cache is available on like 91% of browsers, and Tom actually gave this really funny quote. You literally have zero excuse if the second boot of your app isn't close to instant. Basically, he was saying, App Cache is available right now. There's no reason why we shouldn't be using that. So the other thing they talked about was Glimmer 2, and they had a whole section. Yehuda had a whole section on it. And he demoed actually some benchmarks for component-heavy UIs, and they were really, really impressive. Basically, here's what it looks like today to render component-heavy UIs. We're behind React at about 15 frames per second, but this is what he demoed. It's going to look like in a Glimmer 2 world with Canary. So you could see that that with Ember, it's 40 frames per second, and then without Ember, and it's just ES6 modules, we're getting to basically the limit of how fast we can render. And so he talked about how they're doing some more work in Ember to get faster, to get closer to 60 frames a second. But as you can see, the rendering performance is basically going to go away once we get to Glimmer 2. The other benefits that he talked about for Glimmer 2 were faster initial renders, and smaller templates. Again, this is one of the talks I would recommend everybody go watch, but the demo of Glimmer 2 was really impressive. Overall, I think the keynote got me really excited about the future of Ember and the direction that we're headed. And like I said before, there were a ton of great talks and a lot of great information, and I want to try and pull that down into a couple of different slides. The most overarching thing I can say about the conference was that I walked away feeling really confident about our company's choice to bet on Ember for our mobile app, for our web applications, mobile and desktop. And so basically, I feel like overall the conference proved to me that Ember really is the cure to the hype fatigue. There really seems to be no question that Ember is going to soon reach the mythical plateau of quiet productivity. As a community, I think we're doing a really good job of no longer playing catch up, but actually help shaping the front end revolution. Ember CLI, they talked about, is the default way now to build Ember apps. They gave some ridiculous stats about how many times Ember CLI is downloaded and used, and it was just amazing. And they talked about the fact that both React and Angular are building CLIs on top of Ember CLI. The RFC process, they talked about how the RFC process and the LTS release channels are continuing to allow for us to move forward without really risking stability. And so that was really impressive. And the other thing that they talked about was how the core team and these new initialized sub-teams, they have sub-teams now for Ember Data, for Ember CLI and Ember Learning, are going to provide dependability and consistency in terms of code and community oversight. And I think that we're really helping shape the kind of the way that apps are built these days with Ember Inspector, with Ember Twiddle, with Ember Observer, with Smoke and Mirrors and Ember Concurrency. All these projects, they talked about how these projects are kind of across the board helping people think about the way that they build front-end web apps. The last thing I would say is if community was a feature, we would absolutely win. I think that Ember as a community is a vibrant, growing community, incredibly smart people. We're all working together to make the web and Ember better, and we're having a really good time. I know one of the coolest things that I got to go to, we went to the happy hour. It was a lot of fun getting to meet a lot of different people. And then at the conference, every day we would sit with different Ember developers during lunch and get to meet them, and it was really cool. I actually got to have a hallway track session with the Ember Weekend guys and talk about fast boot, and that was really helpful. And so I think the community, I know it's been said a lot, is just really probably one of the best features about learning Ember. There are a lot of really great talks, and it's really difficult, I think, to try and pick a few to highlight. But the talks that I'm going to mention here were basically the ones that gave me the most to think about in terms of kind of concepts and ideas that I can bring into my own apps that we're working on at Skills Engine. The first talk is obviously the keynote by Tom and Yehuda. I think if you have time, you should definitely watch that. I really enjoyed the two talks about building desktop apps and building mobile apps. I think as I'm thinking through how we're going to extend our platform, those talks are really helpful in thinking through what it looks like to have Electron or Cordova and have an Ember app running inside of them. The talk by Sugar Pirate about idiomatic ways to build Ember, and then Charles's talk on immutability, like both kind of blew my mind and helping me think through how do you build UIs smartly in Ember. And then one of the things that we're doing a lot at Skills Engine is data viz. And so the idea that I can actually use Ember components to build parts of D3 was really exciting, because I don't know how many of you have played with D3, but it can be like trying to draw Photoshop in code. And so the idea that you could do data viz that doesn't suck was really exciting to me. And really and truly, the most important thing that I took away from EmberConf was that Tom is really raising the bar for the dress code. This guy wore a suit the whole time, and every time I walked by him, I felt like a scrub. And lastly, if you haven't been in the Ember Slack, or you're not on Twitter, or if you live under a rock and you just aren't connected, these are the places you can go to find information about all this stuff. In fact, most of the links in here were where I got a lot of the information that I pulled. Sugar Pirate's EmberConf GitHub repo is great. It has all of the slides, all of the videos, a bunch of the links from the different talks. Dockyard's Canvas account was actually really, really helpful because it was a 2-track session. You could actually be in one session and watch them taking notes in the other. So it was actually really cool. And then Conference Freaks has all the videos. So that's all I got. Thanks, you guys. I'll put the slides up at that link here in a little bit if anybody's interested.